Hello everyone, Michael Anfield here, and thank you for joining me. So this video I want to just talk about one small thing that I might have missed in my previous last two videos. So as you can see, this is the World Vegan Community Forum, Foundation for Building Ethical, Ecological, Sustainable Communities. And I wanted to really talk about our birthrights as human beings. So once again, the exact wording may change from time to time, but basically these are the birthrights that we um, should have. Now, we don't have these birthrights because we don't exercise them and we don't specify them as this. So the birthright to live and move freely on earth. When we come into this world, we should have the right, or we must have the right to live freely on the earth. Why should we have to pay money to someone to live on this earth, which is supposedly supposed to be free? The right to seed, plant foods, and clean water, the right to individual human sovereignty or self-ownership, the right to privacy, the right, the freedom of informed consent, which is basically the freedom to say if we want to get experimented on, or you know, any kind of but that's again tied into uh, the right to individual human sovereignty, so governing our own bodies, freedom of speech, and the birthright to be nude. So all these should be given to us automatically by universal force or creator. Now, it does not say this in the Bible, does not say this anywhere, but how come indigenous people, First Nations people, and we're actually all indigenous people, how come they get to live on this earth freely in tribes, or at least given their somewhat given their freedom, and other people are not, just because we're you know, we've taken over land from supposedly people that were here before us. It doesn't matter. We're human beings, and all beings on this earth deserve to live freely on this earth. And it's the fact that we're enslaved to money and the laws of governments, and that is why we are living in this current society that we are in, because we are enslaved to money and governments. And so the only way to be free is to completely remove ourselves away from society, away from governments. Now, they might be hard because we're so programmed and conditioned to living in this world, this society that we live in. And it may take a little bit of time to get out of it. But to understand, really, I think these three things, or four things actually, or no, actually, but if you really think about it, the first thing is the real most important. Our birthright to live and move freely on the earth wherever we want. And there's always going to be justifications why we don't have the birthright to live and move freely on the earth. And we need borders, and we need this, and we need that. And it's like, hey, if we really want to live free, we have to live freely on the earth. We don't live free. We don't move freely on the earth. Now, if we want to be able to have plant foods, wholesome plant foods, clean water, and right to seed, then we need to have this as a birthright. We need to have our birthright as individual human sovereignty, and the right to privacy as well. We have a right to claim things as our own, claim our house and our property as our own. That way we can protect our property. That way we can do as we please in our property or on our property. As long as, of course, we're not abusing or destroying Mother Nature, and as long as we take our fair share. And fair share could mean so many different things to different people. But according to Colin Donahue, and I'm going to be posting 2 essays down below, mandatory read on why these things are so important, these birthrights, and why we should walk and cease supporting the government and society. So this is the most important one, I think, is the birthright to live and move freely on the earth is the number one thing. And the other thing is the right to individual human sovereignty, meaning we have the birthright of power to own our own bodies. No one else owns our bodies, our rights to interfere with our body in any and each way. So they can't tell us what to do. They can't tell us to mandatory vaccinate ourselves. They can't tell us to go anywhere. They can't tell us to renew our visas or renew our passports, because we own ourselves. We govern our own bodies. This freedom of informed consent is actually part of this right to individual human sovereignty. So again, this is going to change slightly. I'm actually going to be changing a few things here, but these are the most important things that, and of course, the freedom of speech and the birthright to be nude. But the thing is, though, these two things, the freedom of speech and freedom of informed consent, are more important to people, to most people, than the birthright to live freely on the land, on the earth. And we don't realize that this is the most important thing. That's why we are slaves, because we have to consistently, every and each month, pay for rent. If we own a house, we still have to pay for so-called rent by putting our money into mortgages or property taxes or property taxes everybody has to pay property taxes, and property taxes is the rent. And we have to pay rent and taxes, and just to live here on earth doesn't make any sense. No animal in nature does this. No animal in nature has these, employs these people on the borders and telling us where we cannot go. This is crime and criminal for anyone to tell us where we can go, what we can do with our bodies. And so we need to denounce all of it. We need to announce and voice our birthrights always. And it's the three things here that we need to voice, especially the two things: the birthright to live and move freely on earth, anywhere on earth, and the right to individual human sovereignty, again, or self ownership. So, what does that really truly mean? It means that we have the birthright to live freely. We did not sign any contracts. Maybe our mothers did when they provided us with our birth certificates and our passports and all these things. But ultimately, we as individual sovereign humans did not sign any contract that states that we have no rights and we have to conform to the governments. I don't want to conform to anything. I want to be able to live and move anywhere I want freely. I want to be able to get land whatever I wish. But of course, my fair share of land, which is about 2 acres for each person, 2 acres of arable land. So we can grow our food in order to be self-sustainable. But governments don't want us to be self-sustainable. Now they maybe in some way they are doing good things for us. But in a whole respect, governments lie, steal, cheat, and enslave us. The money system is an enslavement of humanity. We got to get out of the system. Even if veganism and vegans were to have trillions of dollars, it doesn't make a difference. It's still the same system. And we got to get out of the system. That's the thing. We got to get completely away from the government and the system. As I mentioned before, we got to get away. And again, we need to enforce our birthrights as human beings. So the birthright to live and move freely anywhere on earth. That's number one. Number two, the most important things. And again, I'm going to reword these and change them a little bit, but basically the right to individual human sovereignty. The right to govern our power of governing our own bodies without outside influences. These are the two most important things. Then, of course, the right to seed, plant foods, and clean water. The right to privacy, the right to informed consent is under the right to individual human sovereignty, and the freedom of speech and our birthright to be nude. These things are, we came into this world nude. Why are we so scared, and why do we put clothes on ourselves? And in the Bible, it actually says that. Once we start sinning, we actually start to realize what is good and evil, and we start to then put clothes on ourselves because we're ashamed, because we see good and evil. Now, before that, we didn't know anything. We just kind of knew the good. We just kind of knew love. It was all pure until we started to sin. Now, if that really happened, but I truly believe something like that did happen. And for those of you who don't believe in the Garden of Eden or the Bible or anything like that, and I don't believe everything inside the Bible for sure, but I take the good out of all religions. And it could be called the Garden Eden, it could be called Garden of Eden, it could be called Utopia or Utopian Society, whatever. So basically, we want to get back to living in a paradise. A paradise, Eden, utopian world. And that is why I created World Vegan Community, for people to discuss these ideas as well as to create physical communities out in nature. And I mean by physical communities, I mean totally anarchist communities. away from society and governments, not supporting at all these mass enslaved systems. Again, as I mentioned, there may be times when we need money in order to transition away from the society, because we're not going to be totally 100% self-sustainable in the beginning. And so we may need to buy some food, or need to buy some things in order to transition to a totally subsistence lifestyle. But the whole idea is to create veganic homesteading communities. And what that actually means is that homesteading, basically the number one thing about homesteading is self-sufficiency. So becoming self-sufficient. So in the process of becoming self-sufficient, which could take anywhere between 1 year and 10 years, because like a lot of fruit trees do take a lot of time to grow. And unfortunately, if we don't have our bulk of our calories coming from fruit, and we're living in the tropics, then we're not being self-sustainable all year round. Now, some people say they can do that. They can store, tubers and potatoes and things like that. But these are not real food. If we don't have any kind of heating source, any kind of stove or any kind of fire or anything to cook our food, we wouldn't be able to eat these foods to begin with, because you can't eat starches raw. And so the only viable actual food source for us is fruit, because fruit we can eat raw, fruit we can just eat like that. And yeah, I mean, there might be some fruits like coconuts and all these other foods that we may need certain tools in order to get into them. But maybe they're not really, real food for us. Coconut water, how do we actually, if we don't have any tools, how do we actually get into coconuts? Yeah, we can, crack it open with rocks and whatever, but how can we actually live like that without actually using some kind of tools? And even rocks are tools. So, yeah, there's a lot of things on this forum that I think are very vital. And that's why I created this Ultimate Forum. And again, over time, it's going to be maintained and updated, and some of the words, some of the phrases and words may be changed a bit. But otherwise, this is the forum, and it's just how it is. Like, communities always evolve over time for the better. So let's exercise our human birthrights. Once again, just to reiterate about this, reiterate our birthright to live and move freely on earth, anywhere on earth. The right to seed, plant foods, and clean water, and the right to individual human sovereignty or ownership. These are the most important things. The rest of them, of course, are important, but these are the most important of all. These three are the most important. Now, if we want to be nude or not, it's all up to us. But we should have the right to be nude, to walk wherever we want without clothes. Now, of course, there is maybe exception if we're living in colder climates, but we shouldn't be living in colder climates. We should be living in tropical areas, and even tropical areas on mountains and things. It does get cold, because here, 1,300 meters up in Costa Rica, currently where I am, close to Naranjo and Alleluia, sometimes you need to have clothes. You need to have blankets and things, because it does get cold at times, during mornings and afternoons. Mornings and evenings. it does get pretty cold, and so you do need a sweater or something. So that's what I wanted to mention, everybody. Please exercise our birthrights, walk away from our culture one step at a time, stop supporting governments completely. That means all institutions, that means all governments, that means all money. And again, this might take a few years to transition completely to a self sustaining life. And that's really what I wanted to mention here in this video. So thank you for joining me. Please do like this video, give it a thumbs up, and share it around with all your friends and family. Anybody you would find that would find it helpful. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and to subscribe to my email newsletter. Thank you for joining me, everybody. I'm Michael Anfield. Take care. Much love.